Have you ever just looked in the mirror and wondered, how did I get my mom's eyes but my dad's laugh? It's a question that, people have been asking for basically forever. So today, let's crack the code of heredity and find out how we become, well, us.
Right, let's just jump straight into it with a question that gets us all thinking. You see yourself, and it's like a mix and match of your parents looking back at you. So how does that actually work? How does life decide which features you get from whom? That's the big puzzle we're going to piece together.
So all these things, your eye color, how tall you are, even something kind of random like whether your earlobes are attached or free, they all have a scientific name. They're called traits. And getting a handle on what traits are is really the first step to understanding the rules of the whole game.
To solve this mystery, we've got to travel back in time. We're going to meet our lead detective, an Austrian monk from the 19th century named Gregor Mendel. He's the guy who first found the clues that basically unlocked the entire field of genetics.
So what was Mendel's secret weapon? I mean, plenty of people had looked at inheritance before him. But Mendel did something that was a total game changer. He brought math into it. He didn't just look at his plants, he counted them. This one simple idea, blending biology and math, changed absolutely everything.
So how did he do it? Well, his method was brilliant and honestly pretty simple. He picked the humble garden pea because, it grows fast and has really clear, obvious traits. We're talking tall versus short, no in between. Then he'd crossbreed plants with these different traits. And here's the magic ingredient. He would meticulously count the results. This careful, systematic approach was his key to cracking the code.
And through all that careful counting, Mendel hit his first piece of gold, his first major clue in our genetic detective story, the idea that some traits were dominant and others were recessive.
Okay, you have to hear about this experiment. It's so cool. He takes a pure tall plant and crosses it with a pure short one. Now, you'd probably expect a bunch of medium height plants, right? Nope. In that first generation, every single plant was tall. It was like the short trait just vanished. But, and this is the amazing part, when he let those tall plants reproduce, boom, the short trait just popped right back up in the next generation.
And this is where the math really paid off. When he counted those second-generation plants, he found something incredible, a totally consistent pattern. For every one short plant, there were 3 tall ones. Not kinda close, not a rough guess, a precise mathematical ratio of 3-to-1. This wasn't a fluke. This was a fundamental law of nature. So that 3-to-1 thing led him to this huge aha moment. He figured each trait must be controlled by 2 factors. One of those factors is dominance, like tallness, and it always shows up, even if you only have 1 copy. The other is recessive, like shortness, and it stays hidden, totally masked unless you get 2 copies of it. This perfectly explained how the short trait could disappear for a generation and then just reappear later. Okay, so single traits. Got it. Mendel figured that out. But what about multiple traits? Like, are they all linked together? This led him to his next huge discovery, the law of independent inheritance. He decided to level up his experiments. Instead of just looking at height, what if he tracked 2 different things at the same time? So for example, he crossed a plant that had round, yellow seeds with one that had wrinkled, green seeds. What on earth was going to happen now?
And this is what he found. This grid here, what we now call a Punnett square, kind of lays it all out. He didn't just get the 2 combinations his parent plant started with. He also got brand new ones, round green seeds and wrinkled yellow seeds. This was the proof. It meant the trait for seed shape and the trait for seed color weren't tied together. They were inherited independently, which is what allows for all these new combinations.
So, here's the bottom line. Think of it like this. Heredity is like dealing a hand of cards. Getting the card for tall doesn't mean you automatically get the card for round seeds. Each trait is dealt like a separate card from the deck, which is why we see such incredible variety in the world.
Mendel's work in the 1800s was just mind-blowing. But he never actually saw a gene or a strand of DNA. He just called them factors. So what are these mysterious factors? For that, we gotta fast forward a bit and connect his dots to modern science.
So Mendel brilliantly figured out that these factors had to exist, but he had no idea what they were physically made of. It actually took science almost another 100 years to figure that part out. So what are they? Well, today we know that Mendel's factors are what we call genes, and you can think of it like a chain of command. A gene is just a specific section of DNA, and it holds the instructions to build a specific protein. Then it's that protein that goes and does the work in our cells, creating the visible trait, whether it's your eye color or how tall you are. And where do these genes live?
They're packed up really neatly into structures called chromosomes. Think of a chromosome like a chapter in the instruction manual for you, and the genes are the individual sentences in that chapter. And here's the crucial part. You get one copy of every chromosome from each parent, which of course is why you have 2 copies of every gene.
All right, now that we have the basic rules of the game, let's use them to look at one of the most fundamental traits there is, how biological sex is determined. Turns out, it's a perfect, real-world example of Mendel's genetics in action. In humans, here's how it works. Females have a matched pair of 2 large X chromosomes. Males, on the other hand, have a mismatched pair. They've got 1 X and 1 much smaller Y chromosome.
And this really makes it crystal clear. A mother has 2 X chromosomes, so when she has a child, she can only pass on an X. That's all she's got in the deck. A father, though, has both an X and a Y, so he can pass on either one. This means it's the father's contribution that actually determines the sex of the child.
Let's just lock this in. Every child gets an X chromosome from their mom, period. The whole thing comes down to whether they get an X or a Y from their dad. It's basically a 50-50 genetic coin toss every single time, and the father's contribution is what flips the coin.
So Mendel's laws give us this beautiful, elegant framework for how so many of our traits are passed down. But, it's never that simple, right? As we've learned more, we found out the story is way more complex. What about things like intelligence or personality? How do all our different genes interact with each other and with our environment to make us who we are? Those are the huge questions driving the next chapter in the story of heredity, a story that is definitely still being written.